Hello and welcome to the Sustainable Materials Management webinar series, a joint effort between the National Recycling Coalition and the Pennsylvania Recycling Markets Center. My name is Wayne Bowen. I'm the program manager for the Recycling Markets Center and will serve as your moderator today. Today's webinar topic is an update of recycled paper commodities markets. Our presenter today is Megan Workman, who I will introduce in a moment. Following her presentation, we will conduct a question and answer session. If you have a question or comment, please use the Q&A feature located on your control panel. You may also use the chat feature to request assistance if you're experiencing technical difficulties during the webinar. Please note that an edited version of this webinar will be made available for viewing via YouTube links on the National Recycling Coalition and Pennsylvania Recycling Market Center websites. And also please note that the Pennsylvania Recycling Market Center, its affiliates and funders, and the National Recycling Coalition assume no liability resulting from the use of any information provided during this webinar. This webinar is only provided as an informational tool and no discrimination is intended and no endorsement by these organizations is applied. And now I'd like to introduce our presenter. Megan Workman is the price reporter and editor of Fastmarkets RISI, RISI. These positions she's held since August of 2018. Her responsibilities include interviewing various CEOs at top industry companies and visiting numerous mills and recycling and converting plants globally. Prior to Fastmarkets RISI, Megan was the associate editor for the Recycling Today Media Group, where she wrote, edited, and interviewed for Recycling Today magazine and its sister publications, Construction and Demolition Recycling Magazine, Storage and Destruction Business Magazine. Megan was also a reporter for a local bi-weekly newspaper and a business journal. Megan is a graduate of Ohio University with a Bachelor of Science degree in magazine journalism. And now I'm going to turn the program over to Megan, and it's all yours.
Thank you very much, Wayne. I appreciate that. And hello, everyone. I'm excited to update you today on what has been going on in the recovered fiber market. Nothing short of boring, that is for sure. Thank you, Wayne, for the introduction. I am in the New York City office, which for the last 3 months has been my Brooklyn apartment here in Greenpoint, but I'm in what was the Fastmarkets AMM office, so I'm surrounded by a bunch of metal reporters, and I share that because it only makes us all better at what we do. Yes, we're all under the umbrella of Euro money, but we are price reporters covering a commodity, and we've learned, you know, the recovered paper has a lot to relate to those covering you know, aluminum and copper and whatnot. And so I share that to say I am in New York City. My predecessor Greg Rutter, who did this a long time, and I still talk to you every day, and he reviews everything that I do. He is in California. That office just moved to San Francisco, so we are spread out. You know, we are a global company, and I am here in New York. So thank you for that. Today I want to talk about what I'm saying is a transformative 3 years, and I'm starting there because 2017 was the last time that China, you know, it was China's biggest buying year, and I'll go to the next slide here to show what we're going to talk about here briefly in less than an hour. So then and now, comparing the last 3 years, 2017 was China's biggest buying year. It was a volatile year for OCC, the highest priced year that it saw. And so we're going to go back to that year and talk about how China has dismantled the supply chain in the last 3 years here in 2020, focusing on the first 5 months of this year. And wow, what a first 5 months it's been because of the COVID. So we're going to go over some COVID effects on the recovered paper supply chain, focusing on the US and how a lot of this paper is staying domestic and why. And that leads into mixed messages. You know, mixed paper pricing sat in an average negative pricing for over a year. It's been landfilled 4 years. And here we are in May 2020 talking about price increases, demand increases. And despite, you know, restrictions by outside countries, India, South Korea saying that Indonesia, they don't really want this grade because of quality, and they know the lack of buying by China is increasing the availability of OCC. They know it's out there, and so with the lack of export demand, there's been an uptick here domestic. And so that leads into, though there is export demand for this mix, and the brown recycled pulp. Brown recycled pulp is mostly OCC, but I know the ND in Fairmont, West Virginia is mostly making and shipping a mixed paper pulp to China. And so we're going to wrap up with that, letting everyone know that this is where those who are deep in the industry are looking. I'll share with you a quote that contacts in China said, "Brown recycled pulp is the future." That was the word that was quoted to me by them, that they see BRP, I'm shortening to, as the future, because when they said when we want US recovered fiber, it's going to be brown recycled pulp, and they're referencing the ban, which I'll dive into. So excuse me, I do talk fast and I get excited. I'm very passionate about this. So I asked Wayne if I skip over something or please ask questions, we'll refer to them at the end. So let's dive in. Let's go back to 3 years ago. So 2017, it was China's peak buying period. It was also when, they started really rolling out their initiatives that they don't want any more highly contaminated material. And MRFs here in the US admitted, and paper dealers here admitted, yes, we absolutely were shipping them a lot of garbage in those mixed paper loads for a long time. And so admittedly, the national sword was needed. It needed to clean up the quality, and that happened. And so at the same time, though, the OCC, like I mentioned at the start, it was its most volatile year. It saw high pricing, high demand, and it shipped a lot export. And so what a year for OCC and the recovered paper market in 2017, and the 3 years since China has dismantled the market. And I have China global imports in 2017 were 20.8 million tons, and that has been slashed considerably. I have a chart there we'll go over. I wanted to share this is showing, this is a chart I put together every single month. It's pricing. It shows the average pricing of the major grades traded and sold. And it shows 2017's March through May, and then this year's March through May. I share this because December 2017 and January 2018 were the last time OCC's average was $104, which it is this month in May 2020. So at $104 a ton in the US for OCC average, the last time it saw that figure was December 2017 and January 18. But I want to go back to reiterating the importance of that year 3 years ago. And so that's why I share this. Another important note on this, these two charts, the one on the right showing this year, most of these grades, the year over year in May, are increased. I want to point that out because the year over year change, this time last year, that was not so. A lot of the prices were way down. 2019 was a volatile year for recovered paper pricing. Most saw, their pricing come down. And so this year, in this May, to see the averages up, I think that's another sign of what's going on this year compared with last year. So what is going on this year? The first quarter demand export was strong. And that partly was because of COVID. It was, the beginning of the year, import quotas from China. But it was the COVID effect. And so I did have some big mill companies reach out to me, Megan, how in the world could pricing on export go up if in China, this was in January, if they are experiencing this coronavirus pandemic? And I had it explained to me very clearly with, mills in China, with the recovered paper collection in China being affected because all these people were home, the mills there saw the writing on the wall and realized we need to make sure we have enough fiber. So they did demand and bought the first quarter US recovered fiber, and they paid the price for that. Well, at the same time, you had these other countries realizing, well, China has been pretty successful with these import restrictions, so they too have started to nitpick, right? South Korea was threatening 100% inspections, something that Indonesia tried to roll out last year and ran into some trouble, but Indonesia still today has import restrictions that require some to break open their bales, and just extra time and cost that these exporters aren't wanting to pay and deal with all these other things going on. And so Indonesia has become less of a market for some people, as has India, with them getting more picky. But they went through a lockdown, as did Malaysia. It's why I list those countries there that have gone through lockdowns. Their mills slowed down, their recovered paper collections affected. So that affected their demand and then pricing on our end. The UAE, I added that there because they banned recovered paper imports into their country. They're trying to protect their recovered paper mills there. COVID has slowed demand though. So in April and May, what happened the first 3 months, the first quarter of this year, is not true for April and May. And so the finished product demand I'm hearing in China slowed. Their mills are still slowed down. And then here in the US, we had a rampant, I'll go over this in a minute, rampant quarter for mill production, and they have since slowed. And I have a downtime chart in here to show that they've realized that they have needed to slow down. And lastly, that the more supply stay in domestic with the softer export demand in April and May, some exporters, said that they were relieved for the mill demand that had been here because they kept those tons domestic. They're running more into some troubles here in May, and I think heading into June with the softer demand, and now with these U.S. mills slowing down as well. Excuse me, Wayne. Okay, sorry. I thought Wayne sent me a question. Excuse me. Okay. SOP swings due to COVID-19. I threw this in here. A lot of this presentation focuses on OCC with it being such a dominant recovered paper grade here, but I really wanted to make sure I touched on SOP. Of course, with what's going on with COVID and the tissue demand, I wanted to make sure we reviewed some of these stats and understand the difference between this year and last year alone. SOP last year hit rock bottom in pricing. It fell in pricing 11 out of the 12 months, a trend that started in January. And the difference is this year, SOP pricing has gone up every single month save January. And so what's going on? Well, so supply constraints are having a huge effect. You have offices, schools, all kinds of events. Everyone knows what's realistically going on in the US. That's having a huge effect on supply. These shredder companies aren't able to pick up supply. And so it's really, at the same time that supply is so short, demand is up. So pricing has really picked up here, but demand is up as well. And I love this stat from the AF&PA that in March, the highest monthly level for tissue paper production at 700,000 tons nearly equaled about 4 pounds of tissue per US resident. I mean, what a stat for the tissue producers there. I have a lot of recycled content tissue mills as contacts, and they've been telling me that they're using more mixed paper. And then I have other contacts telling me there's no way, there's no tissue paper would use mixed paper. Well, they are, and I'm hearing it from them. There's just a part of that is with such a short supply of recovered paper overall today, with generation off huge because of these COVID reasons and other factors, that these mills are looking for other ways to fill their furnish, and absolutely mixed paper is one, but also alternative grades and tissue recycled. They're using more virgin pulp. One mill said in April they had doubled it from the month before, and they were doubling their buying of virgin pulp in May from their April. It's just an example of the kind of anecdote was told to me about expressing they want to ensure, the stream of supply, and that's one way they do that. The outlook ahead, tissue mills are really concerned about these working from home, that WFH, working from home, because they see the writing on the wall there that here in New York City, some have told me there's no way some of these companies are going to put 4,000 people back in a tower, and so that concerns them with this supply. SOP is a huge, the biggest recovered fiber grade in these tissue mills, and they're seeing that the supply, not just today because of what's going on, but looking ahead, that this is something they're really concerned about. I've had a couple tissue mills say that they switched some of their production to away from home, excuse me. And I think those kind of moves will continue to happen. This is a big number dump. This is the AF&PA, and excuse me, I will add their attribution to those when I forward you this PowerPoint, because this is the AF&PA's data. And I went from the SOP page to this one because it shows that mixed paper consumption is up. It's gone up the last, I think, 4 to 5 months, but my note there says, save October 2019, mixed paper consumption is at its highest level in April 2020 than it's been in the last 12 months at 366,900 tons. That's the highest consumption level this April in the last 12 months, other than October 2019. It was about 10,000 tons higher than that. That is, going along with the picture that is being painted here. On the right, I have some other data points from the AF&PA. The most recent data from them is April, showing that, mixed consumption up 12% from the April a year ago, up 9% when comparing the first 4 months of this year to last. Mill inventories are mixed, are down 4% from the month before, but they're up 6% from the same April 1 year before. And you can see those other figures there, recovered fiber as well. Mill inventory inventories of recovered fiber. They're up 5% in April from the month before, and up 6% this April from last April. The difference here, these numbers were all negative in May 2019. Negative, the fact that, and by negative I mean, I shouldn't blatantly say that, I should send you what I'm saying there, but the mill inventories were down, you know, the opposite of what is written there. A lot of the numbers were opposite there. I also wanted to point out the U.S. container board mill operating rate. It was at 96% in April 2020. What a vast difference from first quarter 2019. There was considerable mill downtime last year that played into the overall volatile market that recovered fiber experienced last year. You see IP took 520,000 tons of downtime. You know, some of that admittedly market related, they said last year. And you see that compared to the 2 years before. Wow, what a difference that was in 2019 compared to the 2 years back to 2017 as well. And then this April, these mills are running 96%. Well, you know, starting in early April though, I had several mill contacts tell me, you know, Megan, we have been running strong. The numbers here support that, but we will need to slow down. Some were concerned that they were going to run out of paper. Some were concerned about end product demand. But you see that we have been keeping here at Fastmarkets RISI this downtime list. We're updating it every week. Please read, you know, PPI Pulp and Paper Week every Friday. We are updating this list. Greg just asked me this morning for any downtime updates that we may be aware of. We want to make sure you're in tune and updated about what's going on, but us as well. It helps to know, of course, what's going on. So after a rampant, you know, running of these mills, first quarter 2020, they expressed the need to slow down these mills, and they are slowing down for multiple reasons. It's a mix of market and maintenance downtime. You know, some mills I try to read between the lines when they're talking as well, because a 2-week downtime, Megan, that you know may get extended to by a couple more. Well, now you've doubled the downtime. So that kind of wording we're paying attention to, and that's going on. So I share that because, wow, 96% in April 2020, but we're coming off of a year where 2019 there was considerable downtime. Now I've had some mills explain, Megan, you know, we ran so well in first quarter 2020. We admittedly skipped our maintenance time. So some of them are seeing they need to take the downtime, right? They need to take this time for maintenance and other reasons. And so as much as one may want to point to it being COVID or related or more, it is as well that they didn't take their springtime typical maintenance downtime, and that is something that is happening. This is a big waste management dump on you, but I brought them up because they have made some changes in the last year that has really affected the way they do business, and has affected the recovered paper market. And so one thing they've done is shifted the amount of tons that they've kept domestic. And so you see in 2020, 81.5% of the recyclable volume, this is recyclable volume, not just recovered paper, their total recyclable volume is 81.5%. It was at 63% 3 years ago. The China number really sticks out to me. In 2017, about 27% of waste management's recyclable volume went to China. The data they shared with me, this data is 2 months old, they shared it was 2% to China so far in 2020. And so this graph is just really clear to show that more material is staying domestic. And the little note in the corner is pointing out one of the changes that they have made in the last year, waste management. You know, I was reading through their most recent quarterly earnings, and they said that yes, we've seen an increase in container weights in the residential line, and it's increased their cost of service, but they've since implemented in the last year a fee-for-service model, and they said it has helped reduce their costs overall, and they've improved that fee model. So I point to waste management because they are the biggest recovered paper supplier in the U.S. So let's take a look at the kind of shifts they've made, and they've definitely made some shifts. I talked to Brent Bell, the head of recycling at Waste Management, about 2 months ago, and he told me this shift is going to continue. The keeping waste management recyclable volumes domestic, keeping them in the U.S. That is a continual goal of the company, and they will keep doing that. So I wanted to make sure we went over that. You know, they pointed to their reasoning being capacity increases, which I will touch a little bit on as well. So with more paper staying domestic, this is another monthly piece of data that I put together. I put this chart together every month, the week after pricing publishes. It's all U.S. recovered paper exports shipped to the major destinations. And you'll see there that year over year, recovered paper exports in March, it's the most recent data from the U.S. government, it's from the Census Bureau, they're down almost 15.5%. Exports. So definitely, you know, I was hinting about the export demand being soft. It absolutely is. And there are reasons and moves such as, you know, waste management seeing that, you know, there's contamination concerns and reasons that keep, you know, the keeping material domestic, but it absolutely is. And that 358,000, nearly 359,000 tons to China. I mean, that number total, that's how much they were, you know, some months for years buying just OCC. So the fact to see China that at 359 nearly is just another notable point. You'll see some of these countries, my point about SOP, the de-inking grades and pulp subs there have zero exports. So some of these countries have pulled back where they're buying, of course, their recovered paper. Let's dive then into talking about China and how much they've decreased their buying. They last week released the 7th batch. That's what this chart here just goes into detail of where the where the import quotas in the 7th batch were released to. It was only 55,000 tons, 55,810 tons. Comparing that to last year, it's down 45%. The import quotas to China, excuse me. And last year's number, the 8.23 million that were allocated so far through 2019, the same time, those were off nearly 38% from 2018. So just continual slashing in the import quotas to China. I reported in early January, it was January 10th, that nearly half of, or about all of the import quotas for 2020 had already been issued. By January 10th of this year, 3.19 million tons in 2 batches had already been issued, where I have total quotas are expected to just reach top 7 million tons this year. So if the top is 7 million, 3.19 by January 10th, absolutely about half of the import quotas were already reached. The outlook ahead is not rosy. I have these 2 quotes I wanted to share straight from some contacts I have with mills in China. One said, you know, if there's not much quotas left and demand is bad for their finished product for mills in China, there's no way the mills in China are paying the higher price. So this contact was referencing the fact that OCC pricing, or not just pricing in the US is so high that these Chinese mills are looking elsewhere for fiber because, you know, they don't want to pay the higher price, but at the same time, they have soft demand for their finished product. They have slower machines running because of this, and their economy is truly being affected very much. The other quote there is just stressing, this contact is stressing the fact that the export demand is soft, and they're trying to let me know why. The fact that, again, another example of the slow finished product and reducing their production rate, and this is all COVID-19 related. It's having a huge effect. So these 2 quotes, I think, help share, paint a little bit of a picture of the outlook looking ahead. And U.S. exporters, U.S. players, but also contacts I have in India and China and elsewhere, they do not have a very good outlook for China demand for U.S. recovered paper. So that really leads to a couple weeks ago, an authority in China made it more clear that they will go through with the ban of recovered paper at the end of this year. I checked with some sources to try to confirm this as best as I could, and one source explained it the best that they could explain it was, Megan, the most recent announcement took the clarification of the ban from 90% to 95%. And audience, the way I will explain that to you is that the ban will not be 100%, but they will still allow grades that some exporters believe will be double sorted OCC and DLK especially, and maybe some used grades, but those are the main chunks. So that's where that 5% gray area is that the contact explained to me. So I wanted to share that with you, that there is a thinking that some of these very clean, DLK will still be shipped, but that leads to, the mills in China and buyers, they admit to me that the U.S. has the strongest fiber. They will never give up U.S. fiber, they've told me. By they, I mean contacts with mills in China. And so what does that mean? What are they looking at? So I have the word future there in the quote because that was a quote said to me in the last 2 weeks. Someone said, someone with mills in China said that brown recycled pulp is the future for China. The second quote I have there, the second bullet, that's a quote I was told a year ago, last January or February of 2019. I was told that recycled pulp is designed for the Chinese market. So I wanted to leave that quote there to let you know that this is not a new thinking. I know we've been covering it. I know others have been looking into it, but the not new thinking means it's figured out. I mean, there's still some figured out being that there are contracts. There's been a lot of brown recycled pulp shipped to China, is what I will say. So these notes here that I have, these bullets, are just an update about what you already know. That in March 2019, Indie Papers Fairmont shipped recycled pulp to China. I checked it's mainly mixed paper. A year ago there was some OCC in there, but I'm understanding that is mostly mixed paper. I tried to clarify if it's a mixed paper pulp, but it just was referred to me as recycled pulp. But that I'm understanding is mostly no OCC is what I should say. The Shanying in Kentucky, they took over the Verso coated printing and write paper mill, and they were supposed to by the end of last year begin making brown recycled pulp. That hasn't happened. The Sunoco's mill in Hartford, South Carolina, ships brown recycled pulp to China, and that's made mostly with OCC, some DS-OCC. I checked up with my contacts who deal with NORPAC, and absolutely that suppliers have shipped brown recycled pulp to China from NORPAC, absolutely, but they're not doing it right now because they have enough demand for their liner and medium, and with this higher OCC pricing, that brown recycled pulp in general has soft demand right now from China because of some factors I mentioned. With the higher OCC pricing, they're slow demand anyway. That's going on right now in May. The last bullet point, I wish I could say more, but I can't. And that's as fun as I could get with it, is that talks are swirling of other brown recycled pulp production lines in the works in the US. That is happening. And that's all I can say. And I will move on from that. This is just a full page to reiterate. This was a paraphrase from a buyer who buys for mills in China that said brown recycled pulp will be in high demand for Chinese mills seeking U.S. recovered paper. I was trying to get a clarification, about this ban, and everyone has said that they will not give up U.S. paper. What does that mean? This is how it was explained to me then, that when Chinese mills are seeking their U.S. recovered paper, it will be brown recycled pulp. This is talking 2021 and on. This is an old chart, and excuse me, it needs to be updated, but it is just Pulp and Paper Board capacity additions that we've been keeping track of, and there are new ones. So I'm going to make sure I forward you that one, because especially if you see at the end this Core Ventures 2021, I remember when we wrote about that, we got several questions. As you should have asked. I have not heard a peep about that since, per the people who reached out to me and asked Megan, what is up with this? This seems, and I know. So I hope to find out more, but this needs to be updated. And that is all I have. I have so much more to say, and please, if you have questions, I would like to answer them. Wayne, thank you.
All right, thank you. So we're now going to field some questions for Megan. If you have a question, please use the Q&A feature on your control panel. We do have a question already, and I think you might have covered this in the last slide. What is the capacity for capacity usage of container board for 2019.
Capacity, oh yes. Oh, did I?
You may have covered that earlier.
No, you know what? That was an idea I had because Greg, for 2019. I know that was downtime. That was downtime, I'm thinking. No, I don't know that off the top of my head.
Okay.
That is something I do know though, and by I mean Greg. So I know I just read that this morning. So excuse me. I will email Wayne. I wrote it down. I will email as soon as we get off the call the capacity for container board for 2019.
Okay. What does a BRP look like, and how does it ship to China?
Good question. So they dry it and then they ship it over there and get it wet again. It's just so interesting. It looks like I want to say it looks like pulp, but it looks like brown pulp. I don't know how else to say
like a paper egg crate, maybe.
It looks like just a bunch. Yes, it looks like that, but it is the what I've seen is in the, like a pulp version, is in the fluffy, like I haven't seen it dried. It is mostly OCC, some DSOCC. Some people put mixed paper in there, and they make it, they dry it, they ship it to China, get it wet again, and dry it again. Which that's why people don't understand how it makes any sense, and that's why I included the quote that contacts in China said for them it does make sense. So I think that's the best way we can wrap around our head around it, is that they say it makes sense.
Okay. Okay, we don't have any questions right at the moment. Just a couple compliments here. Great presentation, very informative.
Okay, good.
Here's a question. Here, actually, a comment on the pulp. It looks like a thick sheet of liner board versus a small, thin sheet you see on a box.
Thank you very much. Was that Bill?
How's that?
Just kidding. Thank you.
If we have some time left, if you want to expand on some of the things you touched on here, go right ahead.
Okay, let me. My screen is being shared. Okay, that's fine. Yes, I had some notes down here. Let's see. The $104 a ton. I had some insight about. This is the last time I covered that US, the average last time, it's $104 this month. The last time it reached that was December 17 and January 18. By February 18, OCC's national average slipped $10 to 94, and it hasn't rebounded strongly since. By June 2018, OCC averaged 66 a ton. So I focus on the average because 2019 was the year that OCC hit the lowest average ever of $22 a ton, and that was in November. The export side, some of these countries have started to come back. Malaysia, India have started back up slowly. Indonesia is still slow because of the Ramadan, and they had a lockdown. That's where I was saying some of that SOP supply. Let's see. Speaking of supply and demand and mix, its demand from the U.S. is continuing to increase. Oh, here's a great note. I didn't know. Didn't think to ask or tell you because it's in my notes. Based on the total consumption for 1/3 of the year, that's this year, full year consumption of mixed paper is expected to rise by 360,000 tons this year. So mixed paper consumption of mixed paper is up 9.1%. So based on the total consumption for 1/3 of the year, that would mean full year mixed paper consumption would rise by 360,000 tons. This is from the AF&PA and some number crunching on my end. Further, OCC consumption is up 8.1%, AF&PA says. So in 1/3 of the year, OCC consumption's up 8.1% in 1/3 of the year so far this year. High grades are down 1.7% as some print houses have closed. And so that's another thing I did not think to touch about. There's a lot going on SOP, which I feel a little lacking that I crammed it all in this one page, because there's so much going on with the tissue side. But the high grade side, with these print houses closing, it's another thing going on that I didn't think to touch on. It's really affecting supply of SOP out there for sure, and demand. Mills, the downtime page I had on there, that this week I checked up with some mills, and they said they confirmed they're still taking downtime and the generation is not improving. So that's something I didn't touch on that I really should have, now that I just realized the word generation, because that is having a huge effect. The OCC and the SOP generation, the lack of it, I've heard, some regions, I've heard in the Midwest and the Northeast, the OCC at some of these plants are off up to 70%. And people don't want to believe that number, but I've seen some of the hard numbers, and the levels are really off. And some people are pointing to, automotive plants, with some of these, automotive plants being down, especially in the Midwest there, huge supply of OCC not being generated right now. The generation's off. I also forgot to mention about waste management, the fact that, they closed some MRFs because of COVID in California, where Public Services did as well. They were worried about their workers, I understood. But they also, waste management, in Broward County, Florida, in February stopped collecting mixed paper. And so there's these generational shifts that have gone on that haven't picked up because of COVID. So on my COVID page, I really should have touched on generation, because that is having a huge effect on supply at the same time that domestic demand was really strong up until this month. And driving home the point that China has dismantled the supply chain. If I had more time, I would have driven that home a little more. Just the fact that, they were the gorilla. That's how people described China for years. For 15 to 20 years, China bought, I think it was like 40% of our paper. And and the fact that their import quotas are down 45% this month from last year, it's really having an effect on our recovered paper. Now, I didn't do a lot of forward looking here, and I didn't want to, but that is something, maybe, Wayne, we could do another, and where is this going, other than the export side, maybe more domestic of what this will mean with less paper shipping export.
Yeah, a couple of questions came in while you were talking, Megan. Yes. And again, you might have shown this before, what's the current pulp capacity in the U.S. now?
The brown recycled pulp capacity?
Yep.
I didn't show that because,
okay.
because of the last point there. Swirling.
Right. There's stuff in the works that we can't talk about.
I wrote an article a year ago that said globally, the recycled pulp, and I can forward that to people. I had a chart there, and I should have actually, now that we're talking about it, I should have pulled that chart from it. And that chart had these capacity figures. So let me put a star there, the capacity pulp chart. Because I wrote that, it was about this time last year, it was maybe July of last year. I wrote a big article about this, saying that the global capacity for recycled pulp will be about 6 million tons. And how did I come up with that number? And that's where this chart comes in. So I will make sure that's sent along with this PowerPoint for attendees today, because that is a good question. And I already have the data, so why not share it? And I show in that chart where we see the 6 million tons coming from. And by we have PPI Asia. I have Hannah Zhao, which hopefully everyone knows. She's our economist that does what I do, but she's the economist. She's very in tune in that too, and she helps me figure out those numbers with her sources there. So that's another thing. Capacity US, but also globally on the pulp side, I can share in a chart.
Megan, do you want to do that through your email, or do you want me to handle that?
I don't mind. I can do it.
Could you provide your email to the group here?
Yeah. It's here we go. It's mworkman@fastmarkets.com.
Okay, appreciate that.
And that is my work line, and I have since learned that I can access my voicemail through even working from home. I learned this week. So Wayne, Now I know that. And so
Okay.
please, anyone, feel free to call me. It works just as if it doesn't ring to my cell phone, but if you please do leave a voicemail and I will get it now. So please know that. And I am welcome to all emails as well.
Here's another question, Megan. From the municipal curbside perspective, for residential and commercial, what are the contaminants that people need to know about in paper?
Oh, I thought you were going to ask, which I had a really good stat from Waste Management said they've seen their contamination level drop. It was 25%, and now I think 2019, I don't know, that's 2020 data, 29 is 20%. So dropped 5% in the last 2 years. It was 20. Yeah. So the contamination level has dropped, but what are contaminants? Not that this is a contaminant, but one of the biggest gripes that MRFs say is shredded paper. People, because of security, they shred their paper, but it's one of the worst things that MRFs will tell you that they get, because it's just all these pieces of paper going everywhere, and they don't end up recycling a lot of the time, which is sad, because it is so many of these tiny pieces of paper. So they'll tell you that a lot in the overall stream is shredded paper. But glass is number one. I went to a paper mill about 8 months ago. I toured a paper mill, and they had this whole entire section dedicated to the glass removal, and it was disgusting. But it was just from that day that all this glass was in their paper stream, pulping it out. So glass is huge. I'm a personally sustainable environment. I want to recycle it all, but I do understand the dual stream benefits. I wrote an article about a year ago talking to the paper mills and the MRF side. Well, can we ever go back to dual stream? And of course, the MRFs all said no, and the paper mills said they wish. But here we see this in May, 2020, that some have gone back to that. And here in New York City, we do have the separate bins for paper in our residential stream. So it is. I just think we've already gone so far into single stream. That's what a lot of contacts explain, that the mindset. The whole reason we went to single stream was the mindset of Americans, and so.
Are there any national or state policies needed to expand investment in domestic recycled mills?
Yes. Yes, and there absolutely, yes, and there are some initiatives going on, some on the EPR side. I know that's already a thing in Canada, but it's starting to be more in headlines today in New Jersey and some other states that are looking at EPR initiatives. But they understand they need to put regulations behind that, and so I think recycling as well. I think with the COVID, they started, our MRFs essential, our paper mills essential, and we had never thought of those kind of questions before. And so I think the COVID has forced us to ask those kind of questions. And so I forget the question now. I just got an email. Sorry.
Okay, I'll keep going here. Here's a comment and a question. Post-consumer recycled plastic content requirement is projected to be negatively affected by the falling oil prices, making virgin plastic resin desirable, but it seems like the demand for post-consumer recycled paper is positive unless we want to cut down more trees. Is this all relevant?
Is it relevant?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I would say so too. Yeah.
Yes.
Due to the changes in demand, will the increase in types of materials we currently keep out of municipal programs, such as paper cups or other items, in other words, will that increase? Will we have more demand for paper cup items and maybe even the containers, paper containers?
Are they asking like the packaging, or are we going to see a shift to, like paper straws?
Yes, stuff that's not typically collected right now.
Oh, collected at the MRF side.
Yep.
Yes. And so that was something I had in here and I took out, but I will touch on it, is that companies, mills, they have invested in, I know Alpine Recycling in Denver. I checked up on them, and they're still doing this. They say they're recycling coffee cups because they do it through the DPR, the old Fox River mill there, recycles those. And so absolutely, I think it takes partly funding. I know that Alpine got funding, I think from the they got funding from someone to do that.
Yeah, the Carton Council. Yep.
Yeah, I thought it was the Carton Council. I didn't want to say that wrong. Thank you. And so, yes, I think more and more, a lot of recycling. One thing I really got out of the Waste Expos that I used to go to, those conferences, was that a lot of recycling, Keep America Beautiful taught me this, and the recycling partnership is also incentivized, right? Americans need to be incentivized, but it's also a feel good. So a lot of us do it just because it makes us feel good. And so I think, to your question, that yes, more people are going to want to recycle these things because they've become more aware, but also as they do become more prevalent in the packaging industry. And so we see, these plastic bag bans. Absolutely, here in New York City, there's such an increase in the craft paper use, and Greg's been touching on that as well. I went to the CVS recently, no plastic bag in sight. It was all paper bags at the CVS. So those kind of changes absolutely are happening, and I recycle all brown paper bags. I think that's another thing Americans. So yes, once Americans, it's awareness, it's incentivizing, and so will those things be recyclable? I've heard on the mill end, yes, they want to. They of course want to keep this recovered paper market afloat. I mean, it's their business, and so they too have been looking at ways. And I, as my job as a reporter, I make sure to ask mills that, what are you doing to stay afloat, or how are to adhere to these changing times? And one of them is something else I didn't touch on in my mixed papers point, is investing in equipment to be able to process mixed paper. So not just the tissue guys, but a lot of container board users as well have invested in machines to be able to use more mixed paper. I really should have drove that home because that is going on. The only reason it's not a big news topic right now is because of pricing and where that is, that they don't see the advantages when OCC was so low of running the mixed. But that is something they have already invested. I have companies, Megan, yes, we've run the trials, it works, we invested in it. It's just on pause right now, kind of like with the NORPAC I had mentioned on that one slide about the brown recycled pulp. NORPAC, they have the capabilities, but they're not doing it. That's the same with mixed paper, that these mills are looking at how can we continue to take in paper and recycle it well without a lot of contaminants. And this is one. I think coffee cups is definitely one. And these more paper packaged materials, I do think that for sure. Now things like, now this is plastic, but like K-cups and little individual things, that's a whole nother story, right? But major products like coffee cups that are used by the, yes.
Okay. What do you believe is driving the decrease in contamination in the curbside?
Driving the decrease?
Yep.
I wrote that story about a year ago, and in that story, I talked to both sides, not both, but I talked to a lot of people who, in the MRF side, said, they credited themselves for rolling out initiatives, right? They really put their money where their mouth is, and they invested in these recycling programs to, put out truly, oops stickers on bins or rejecting bins, which really makes people mad. But if you reject it, a lot of times they learn through studies that they learn and will fix it for the next time. So it's MRFs investing in educational programs. Education is huge. Even simple things of very clear 5 in the bin, 5 not in the bin. Just as simple. When you send a list of 80 things, the residents gloss over it. But when they have found, when you send a list of 5 yes, 5 no, or however the messaging is, that works. So I absolutely believe it is the investment on the MRF side, that what they've done to roll out the importance of clean recycling, but also same with the trade associations. ISRI, PSI does do a great job with messaging as well, I think. I think it's mostly the work being done, investments on that end. And the person who asked about, does should there be more regulations or investments? That too. I think once municipalities start getting more involved in their programs, other than just putting the weight on like waste management or public services or any of those shoulders, I think that too, when you have a really well organized recycling, coordinator or whatever in your city, those things really matter too.
Okay, thanks. Okay, I think we're going to wrap up now. So again, this webinar, like all the webinars in the series, has been recorded. Will be made available via YouTube links on both the National Recycling Coalition and Recycling Market Center websites. And as we said before, Megan gave her email out. So if you have any follow-up questions or you would like actual copy of the slide deck, she can provide that for you.
Yes.
So thanks again for joining us, and we hope you'll join us for next month's webinar. And please visit the NRC and RMC websites for schedule updates. And thanks again, Megan, for taking the time out to make this very informative presentation.
Thank you very much, Wayne, for having me. I really enjoyed this, and I look forward to any emails from anyone of interest. Thank you very much.
Okay. Have a great day, everybody.
Thank you.